Welcome back to another episode of the Unheard Perspective podcast. I'm your host, Sasha Riva, and today I have a special guest, Logan Dubil, a college student at Point Park University who aspires to be a journalist and political content creator upon graduation. He has already been interviewed on outlets like Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN, and doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon. So Logan, welcome to the podcast, and let's get started. What has inspired you to pursue a career in the journalism, political commentary, and you can share your experiences on where you started and who you were?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on. My interest in politics and journalism really goes back to 2016 when Trump was elected in his first term in office. I wasn't really into politics or journalism at that point, but just seeing kind of the reactions from both sides, those who supported him celebrating it and those who opposed him being really upset, kind of got me interested. I mean, he obviously won for a reason, and people obviously don't like him for a reason. So that's when I started doing my research. Upon my research, I realized that I leaned a little bit more conservative and that I agreed with a lot of the things that he wanted to do as president of the United States. So that's when I started to be a little bit more outspoken about my views. You know this from experience. If you're an outspoken conservative, you do receive a lot of pushback for that. So the pushback and the negative reactions I got from being an outspoken conservative is what sprouted my journalism and content creation career. I wanted to be producing content to let people know about the conservative side of things. I wanted to cover what was happening in the news, cover what was happening on campuses and things like that. I've just had a lot of really cool experiences. I've worked with numerous outlets so far, mainly outlets that cover higher education since I'm a current college student. I've published kind of opinion pieces in some papers. I've been interviewed by some of the major outlets about some of my work. And yeah, I guess I can thank Donald Trump for all of this experience.
So can you share more about your background on national television platforms? I know that you have been a couple of times on Fox News and Newsmax and other news outlets. Can you share all your experiences about it?
Yeah, of course. So my first ever national media hit was on Laura Ingraham's show on Fox News. So I was literally thrown into it. I feel like that's probably one of the most, not to pat myself on the back, but probably one of the most impressive shows to kind of land yourself on for a first time media hit. But no, that was actually an exclusive article I wrote. I was writing campus reform at the time, and I wrote an exclusive article about my university, Point Park University, and a pronoun mandate that they put in place. The school was telling all of its students that you had to refer to your classmates by their preferred pronouns. You weren't allowed to use their dead names. And if you were making them uncomfortable when it came to the whole gender ideology issue, they could go to administration and get you in trouble. So I saw a huge issue with that. I kind of exposed what was going on. The day after I published that, every major news outlet imaginable covered it. The New York Post covered it, Blaze Media, Fox, Daily Mail, all of those big namers. And then that's how I ended up getting on Laura Ingraham's show. One of her, part of her media team reached out and wanted to have me on to kind of explain what was going on there. So I feel like after that, I've started to make a name for myself. I was the known conservative on my campus, so there wasn't really any backing down at that point. Everyone knows where I stand. So that kind of fired me up a little bit more and made me want to be even more vocal about my views, because I knew if I wasn't going to do it on my campus, no one else was going to, and there wouldn't be any conservative views being spread. So that really that really got me more involved with writing as many articles as I could, reaching out to these news outlets and seeing if they'd be willing to have me on to talk about. I know Newsmax invited me on one time just to talk about the overall experience of being a conservative on college campuses, and I got to give some advice to the viewers about what they should do if they were in my shoes. I've been on OANN a couple of times, kind of talking about similar things. I've talked about gender ideology on OANN. I've talked about the GOP debates on OANN. So I just feel like the first Fox News hit really, well, like I said earlier, allowed me to make a name for myself. And from there, it's been a little bit easier to get on just because people kind of know what my views are and what I am, I guess like a quote unquote expert on and things along those lines.
How do you stay unbiased when you share a piece of story? And as a journalist, how do you find the accurate and actual fact-based information in an era where it's all about misinformation or censorship?
Yeah, so this is very tricky, especially because my niche right now, what I cover is, liberal bias within the higher education system. So as a conservative, yes, I obviously disagree with a lot of the things that I cover, especially when it comes to these crazy protests you see on campus or some of the things being pushed by our professors in the classroom. So I just need to remind myself that while I'm writing news pieces, I need to leave my opinion out of it. It doesn't matter if I agree or disagree, because that's not how you spread news, by being opinionated with your writing. I make sure that I'm reaching out to both sides sides of the issue when I'm covering a topic. For example, coming up this week, if I end up writing a story on this, there's an abortion conference at the University of Pittsburgh. So if I'm going to be covering that from a news reporter angle, I need to make sure that I'm interviewing pro-choicers who are there and pro-lifers who disagree, just to get both sides. And again, I need to leave my opinion out of it. Now, I also do a lot of content creation. So when I do share my articles, that's when I'm allowed to be opinionated, because it's, I'm creating content. I want to show what's happening on. And then obviously, First Amendment right, you're allowed to have opinions on things. But yeah, it's just important to separate your writing from your analysis and commentary. And then when it comes to the whole disinformation and, some things being factual and non-factual out there, I make sure to kind of fact check. I look at multiple sources, make sure things are aligning, because one of my biggest fears is covering things that aren't true, because that, first of all, can cause a lot of issues, and second of all, doesn't give me a lot of credibility as an aspiring journalist.
You have one story that happened to you, and this story went to national news, and I would like to hear it from you. So what happened on campus when Michael Knowles came to speak?
Yes, this is probably my biggest story that I covered when it comes to news-wise and views. Back in April of 2023, Michael Knowles was invited to speak at the University of Pittsburgh. He was supposed to debate a transgender professor on, the LGBTQ issue and transgenderism. The professor ended up dropping out of the debate, so they brought on another conservative who kind of disagreed with Knowles a little bit, and they had a debate. The liberal mob in Pittsburgh went crazy. There were hundreds, if not 1,000 protesters outside of the event venue. There were smoke bombs being set off. There were fires being set. There was an explosive device that was set off on campus. It was probably one of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. It set off really close to where I was, so that was a little bit worrisome. I just so happened to be at the right place at the right times for that. I got really good footage, really exposing how angry and violent these leftist protesters are. They were trying to knock over the barricades. They were cursing everybody out. And like I said, throwing things, setting off bombs. All of my footage from that got not only a lot of views on social media, but Tucker Carlson ended up airing it on one of his last segments with Fox News. And that was always it's always been a goal of mine to go on his show and get interviewed, but I will definitely take my footage making it there too. So that was probably one of my proudest moments, and I'm happy that I was there. It was also a little bit upsetting, though, that not a lot of other people were reporting and kind of showing what was going on. I'm not sure if they wanted to hide and make it seem like it wasn't a big deal, but for all of my conservative friends and those who wanted to hear Michael Knowles speak about this issue, it was a very scary time, and it's very sad that everyone had to go through that just to be able to, hear an unpopular opinion on a college campus.
I've seen the news. I've seen the video. I think that you recorded and Tucker showed it. It was crazy. I cannot believe how they can do that. So let's get to another question. You're very well known on TikTok for doing some of the controversial videos about the left side and the government. And as we know, this platform steals information, and there is a national security concerns, and its ownership by a Chinese company. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so going into making a TikTok account, when I first made it, I was just on there to kind of view the videos. I didn't really have any interest in posting anything. And then I started kind of scrolling through my algorithm and, the For You page. For those of you who are on TikTok, you know what the For You page is about. But I started seeing how liberal the videos were and how every opinionated video was liberal leaning, and how I was getting a lot of LGBTQ friendly videos on there. And I wasn't really seeing a lot of conservative content. And I do believe that Gen Z and social media plays a huge role in what people view certain issues about, and kind of what angle they take and what approach they take on certain issues. I already had my account made. If what everyone's saying about the platform is true and my data is being stolen and stuff like that, it's already happened. There's really no going back. So I wanted to kind of take advantage of that and be the one to be pushing out conservative content. I do believe that there needs to be fair representation of views on all of the platforms. I'm very anti-censorship. I know a lot of conservatives, as you mentioned in your question, are a little bit worried about the origins of the app and what it's meant for. But I think that we need to play the game that the Democrats and the left play. And if they're the only ones posting on these social media platforms, they have a huge advantage when it comes to spreading out their information, misinformation, and especially when it comes to election season. You have all of these Democrat officials campaigning on there and reaching Gen Z. And if conservatives aren't doing the same, there's no way we're going to win anything ever again. So believe it or not, I've had quite a few videos go viral, and a lot of people thank me for posting what I post and like my content. Of course, sometimes I will reach the liberals on TikTok and they're not too happy with what I'm posting. But yeah, I would say it was a concern in the beginning, but now that I've kind of committed, I try to post a couple times a day, especially if there's breaking news. It's very easy to do a quick little commentary video or whatever sounds trending. I just try to make it with a conservative angle, and I've done pretty far on the app so far. So I just think that if we aren't on there, there's really no way to win an election or have our views heard.
I remember once Vivek said that we need to go and target that platform because that's the only way we can reach another percent of generation that is ignorant about politics, and Gen Z, that's the only way we can reach them. Are you working on any new projects that will be related to your career in media? And what advice would you give for future journalists looking into entering that field?
Yeah, of course. Yes, I'm always working on projects, whether that be recording protests, writing articles. Just yesterday, I was at protests at the University of Pittsburgh. Any time that there's a protest or something that I'm able to get to, I will be there and film, because I think that people need to know what's going on our campuses. The argument I hear most from ignorant people are, these are just like once in a lifetime events. These protests aren't happening every day. Professors aren't pushing that in the classroom. That isn't happening, and it's happening daily. So if we don't have people out there filming what's going on campuses and exposing their professors for indoctrinating people, the higher education system is going to stay the way it is. So yes, I'm always working on projects. Advice for people getting into this, I feel like this is the most important piece of advice I could give is, like, if you want to enter this career, you have to be willing to put in the work. Some people, I feel like it as easy as getting a topic that you have to write about and kind of just writing the article out and submitting it, or filming the video and submitting it. But we've talked about fact checking so far. You need to make sure everything is accurate. You need to make sure that you're reaching out to sources. You need to make sure that you're getting good content. Yeah, I do believe a lot of work goes into being a good journalist. So if you aren't willing to put in the time, and if you think it's just going to be a little easy side gig, I don't think it's for you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining for this special episode of the Unheard Perspective podcast. I feel like you shared a lot of information, especially about your story, how you got into it, eventually how you grew into being a good journalist, being on major news networks that are all over, and people from all over the world listening to it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
So for the listeners, keep being involved, and let's continue seeking the unheard perspectives that shape our world. Thank you so much for listening.